The recommended action is above, approve the items below, which include the on the consent agenda, 5A, meeting minutes of the December 15th board meeting, and 7B, special education. I have a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen. I have a second.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Any exclusions of the two items? If not, may I please have a vote?
Oh. Um, 6 yes.
Okay, motion passes six yes, 0 no. For the good of the cause, Karen, do we have anybody?
Let me check. I just checked a minute ago and there was no, there's nothing.
Okay. Reports. First report is the health and safety for buildings and grounds. You have an attachment, which are the meeting minutes from December 14th. Dana, would you like to hit the highlights for us?
Sure. As I'm looking at it going, oh, the date's wrong on the minutes. 14/14, not 12/14. My apologies. I'll have to change that. But basically, when we met, we really just, we focused on the capital project. And as you can see, you know, and even if you come around the school, you'll know where we are with this. You know, things are wrapping up. They were really just kind of focusing on the punch list at this point. The auditorium was nearly complete at this time. I believe that probably the auditorium is complete at this point. Dow Electric was supposed to come in yesterday to start working on some of their things as well. That's what we talked about. In the end, they actually, the materials came in earlier, so they actually did it over break. So they haven't been around because they got through everything they needed to get through, with, I think, the exception of the covers of the lights and the loading dock side of the middle high school. You can see the elementary, the elevator is up and running as well. I mean, at this point, most of the work at the elementary school has been completed. Really, the focus has been at the middle high school in terms of wrapping things up there as well. Had building updates, and really it was truly the focus was the middle high school because of some things there. The elevator at the time still wasn't operational, but it is now. They are though working out some kinks. It's not operating as smoothly as they were wishing. So reached out to Schoolhouse, and the elevator contractor Bay State are supposed to come in. It's functioning, however, not 100%. We talked about basically the access phones at in the new vestibule, and that's been a troublesome issue since the beginning in terms of having both sets of doors operational by being buzzed in, and the access phones allowing people to come in once they get notified from the main office. So they're trying to work on that. We're still trying to get them to install the handicapped accessible panels, the buttons on the vestibules on both buildings, so that have that. That's been an ongoing issue that no one seems to have an exact clear answer as to how everything can be done. For transportation, we talked about the security cameras that were installed at the bus garage, the Shipman Youth Center, as well as the athletic field. So they're installed, but not 100% complete. We got Joe Ballou is working on that connection so that we can view the cameras through our software system. And sure enough, when we reached out to Spectrum about putting an internet connection in the concession stand at the athletic fields, they said, yeah, no problem. And then when they came on December 23rd, they said, oh, by the way, we can't do this without you putting in a pole or running underground conduits because it's so far away. So I wish they would have told us that before we approved the project, because you got cameras sitting on the light tower ready to be used, and we have no way of accessing them right now. But so we're looking on some solutions there, going with some antennas and a wireless system, or just putting in a DVR so that if ever we need to access the cameras, we just go down to the concession stand, pull the DVR like we do for our buses, and view the footage that way. So that is a possibility in order to do that because of the lack of internet access. And I don't think the town's going to let us put a pole in or do some underground conduit drilling in order to get internet to the concession stand. So, but those are all the things we kind of talked about and more. Kind of gave you a capital project update as well and security camera update at the same time.
Any questions for Dana?
No.
Great. Welcome,
No,
John.
thank you.
Okay, superintendent's report.
Well, hi, everybody. I thought I would focus on a few things tonight. One is budget information, since we'll be launching into the budget soon. Big picture stuff with the budget involving federal, state government, the Board of Regents, and then how we might expect that to play out here in class. And I'll share with you some good news and take any questions or comments that you have. So I'll start out with the budget information. Just some things that I think it's good to start thinking about as we prepare for the upcoming budget conversations and planning. First, really begins with the federal government. And if you've been following the news on this, you'll know a lot what I'm going to say. The federal government did pass its $900 billion relief bill, and that provides approximately $54.3 billion for schools nationwide. And that translates into approximately $4 billion to New York State schools. So that's passed and should be implemented soon. Compared to the CARES Act earlier this year, individual schools are expected to receive approximately 4 times what we received through the CARES Act. And here that was a little bit over $100,000. So you could guess that 4 times that, maybe somewhere in the $400,000 range. That's sort of how it plays out up front. But some other things to note is that there was no additional financial support for state and municipal governments involved in this relief bill. And that means that we should expect great shortfalls in state government funding in other areas. So why is that important to education? Well, we know that what happened with the CARES Act when they provided us with, Dana knows the exact number is $100 and something thousand. That was immediately offset by an equivalent reduction in state funds. So in fact, once we receive that CARES Act money, it's a zero-sum game. We didn't actually receive any additional funding through the CARES Act because of the reduction in state funding. So it's possible, and we don't know, of course, it is possible that we could be looking at that kind of scenario again. And that would be, I think, especially the case if New York doesn't receive any additional funds and can't figure out any other ways to make up with the shortfall. Now, Albany's going to be discussing all the possibilities when they open the legislative session this week. So that is going to be, I imagine, of great interest in the news. Now, thinking optimistically, there are other components of the federal legislative outcome, the legislation itself, that could help to close part of the state's budget imbalance. And so that's potentially good news. Also potentially good news is that through September, the state tax receipts that were being we were being warned were extremely low. They're exceeding those projections. So it's not, we don't know. In other words, we don't know after all of this how this is going to impact our funding. But I guess what I would do is I would put that before you to not get too excited about the federal relief bill, and to recognize that it is possible that even with that additional support, we could see another shortfall in state aid when it comes to next year's budget. So here in New York State, the Board of Regents has been making recommendations, as they usually do this time, but altered, of course, for the situation. So the Board of Regents has asked the state to avoid cuts to school. And that would be for this year, keeping things level. And that would also be for next year, right? Because we still don't know what this year's source state funding is, even though we were provided with numbers way back in March and April. So Board of Regents is recommending level state funding for this year and for next year, but that level is based on 2019-2020 school funding level. So even the Board of Regents, who typically ask for significant increases in school funding, significant increases in the billions, they're not asking for any additional funding for this year or next year. They're asking really for flat funding. And we all know that flat funding, when the numbers are flat, will likely represent real decreases after you consider for the usual cost of living increases that go along with running any organization, including a school district. So the regents are doing that, but they're also advocating for some additional support, mandate relief, and regulatory flexibilities for school districts that they hope will reduce some costs. So again, even after the Board of Regents met in December, we don't have any clear idea from them except to keep things flat. The federal and the state numbers are still uncertain, with some promises and some potential pitfalls. Now here in Lake Placid, we have some, again, sort of mixed news. We could potentially overcome any reductions to our budget for this year. Actually, we fully expect to be overcoming the reductions to this year's budget due to the decreased expenditures that Dana's been talking about every month with his budget status report. So that's potentially good news that we can make it through this year without the great gaps that some other school districts are finding. But we still have no idea about how all of this will play out on our state funding for next year's budget. So just want to put this out there. And I know Dana and I have had casual conversations about this as we start to prepare the budget. We may need to be looking once again at fund balance as a source of revenue, something that we did in the past, but that we stopped with this present year's budget. So that's just something to think about as we start entering this budget season. So I have no answers, just raising some points, and hope to get you thinking about where we might be heading when it comes to these budget conversations. Any questions on the budget stuff?
Roger, when you were talking about the stimulus that passed last week with the potential ballpark, maybe 400,000 coming in, I could be wrong, but when we were working on the budget before over the summertime, when we were considering what loss we would be at, weren't we in the 350 range or something like that, that we would be at a loss for the district? Will this make up for any of that? Even though it's not coming necessarily, it is coming from the state, but it trickled down from the federal government. Will this help at all?
So, I'm gonna ask Dana to comment on this in a minute, but I'll answer your question. So the easy answer is we really don't know, right?
Okay.
So the 350,000 was a ballpark number based on what we were assuming was a percentage reduction of our foundation aid, and in the end, we really don't know if those cuts are coming, even as we approach even though we're in the second half of the fiscal year, right? So all of that we don't know. We started to project when they began to carry out these cuts and then pulled back. We started to project that 350,000 might actually end up being 600,000 because we were initially looking at cuts to foundation aid, and then lo and behold, we discovered cuts to transportation and other reimbursement aid. So the 350 itself was our best guess, and that has proven to be a very, I guess, uncertain guess.
Okay.
So, that's the first thing. In terms of what budget year all this is going to come into, by providing us aid this year, I think it is likely that we're talking about this year, but I'm going to ask Dana to weigh in on this just in case I'm getting some of this. I might be off because we're crossing so many budget years on all of this.
Okay.
Dana, you have any input or feedback, any thoughts?
Well, to kind of go back, the state has already withheld aid, and they don't publicly say this, but it's a fact, aid that we should have gotten from last year that we actually mark as a receivable. So basically, anytime at the end of the school year, as we're wrapping up and they come in and do our audits, we say, this is what is still owed to us, and we mark it as a receivable, and usually we eventually get it the next year. And the state has already withheld 20% of some of that aid that we have budgeted from last year in ways of excess aid, excess cost aid, as well as a BOCES aid that we were getting. BOCES was told to withhold 20% of our final payments. We were supposed to get about $202,000 from BOCES at the end, and we ended up getting 170 something. So we've already seen some withholdings, not in this year's budget cycle, but last year's budget cycle. But it's real money that it's budgeted, and when you really look at it, it's factored into our surplus. We had about a $1.3 million surplus. Part of that is money that was allocated for state aid that we should be getting that we haven't gotten. Granted, we're talking about $50,000-$60,000, but it's still real money at this point. So, and on the other hand, as Roger's saying, with the unknowns, we don't get the bulk of our state aid until March. So even though the governor has claimed that full aid has been given out early on, it's because most of it doesn't come until March. And and until something happens, I guess at the federal level with monies directly to the states, it's still possible that we could see that 20% or up to 20% reduction, but we won't know until March, because that's our really, our foundation aid, our BOCES aid, all of that comes in the springtime. It doesn't come now.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dana.
Dana. Thanks, Roger.
Yeah, and as you heard Dana refer to the surplus from last year, this is part of the good news is that should the board choose to turn back to using fund balance as a revenue source, that surplus from last year could come in handy in terms of helping us to overcome any shortfalls in the following year or years, and again, depending on how all this uncertain funding goes. So a lot of this is wait and see, but unfortunately, as you all know, we don't have the luxury of waiting and seeing. We'll have to put together a budget. We'll have to base it on our best estimates. And this is a tough year to make good estimates. So start thinking about where you want some of this to land, because we'll be bringing these points up as we go, and asking you to weigh in on how you'd like to look at this. And we'll have some recommendations, of course, but just want to make sure you see how this lay of the land is coming.
I have a question on, I read the most recent newspaper from the state school board publication, and they were talking about essentially encouraging retirement and how that can be done through memorandum of understanding and how the unions are actually behind it. And so I'm wondering if there's been any just thought or discussion about some sort of incentivizing some of our teachers. And I don't think we actually have that many that may fall under it, but incentivizing some teachers to retire early.
Yeah, and certainly the local school board, local school district, as a local school district, we can provide whatever retirement incentives that, we can put together. Those would be, of course, locally funded, locally financed, locally approved. So we could certainly look that way. And I know that we haven't talked about it yet in terms of injecting it into the budget, but it's good that you bring it up because that's a possibility. But what I wanted to say is that retirement incentives are also publicly implemented and publicly funded when it comes to TRS and ERS. And so that's a possibility. When I look back at the last few financial crises in this state, they typically are followed, not immediately, not during the current crisis, but the year after. They're typically followed with a statewide retirement incentive. So it could be that there's a retirement incentive that's out there for us to grab hold of that would provide that incentive through somebody else's funds, essentially, one of the public retirement systems. But then locally, of course, you have options on which way to go as well. So that'll be interesting to follow up too. I guess it'll all depend on, when we look at revenue and when we look at expenditures, how wide is the gap? So.
Roger, is there a timeline for the retirement incentives? Is that something for this year or the following year, or?
So it's often something that is, it's always something that involves legislation. So the legislature would have to approve it. They usually provide a window, and until they approve it, of course, we won't see a window. But if they were to, approve some kind of retirement incentive, then my guess is there'd be a window that starts sometime in the spring and probably ends sometime, I don't know, summer, fall, winter, right around there.
Okay. Thanks.
But Roger, in our contract with the union, isn't there like a 6-month period that we're looking for teachers to retire? So, if they're going to do locally, if we do something, it needs to be now. Otherwise, it'll be a year from now when they retire.
Yeah, that's true. If we stick to the 5-month window, 5-month advance notice, right? It's always up to the board or up to the board in agreement with the union to do something different that's in the contract. So a memorandum of agreement could be put together if, again, through circumstances, the board and the union together thought that it was a good idea. So there are, I guess what I'm saying is there are options if you cross that deadline and then want to do something afterwards. It is tougher though. You're absolutely right. It's tougher once you've narrowed that time period. Okay, well, I guess we'll be talking about the budget soon. It is 2021. It is January. The budget calendar says when's the next budget conversation?
Initial one's next week.
So
On the 19th.
So on the 19th will be our next budget, our first budget work session. On the good news front, got to have some good news, right? We do have good news. There's a lot of good news. Dana mentioned construction-wise, we're looking at the end of the construction project. And I think just in a very practical way, the elevators working has, I think, has proved to be very hopeful after an entire school year so far without elevators in middle and high school, and with maybe a shorter closure time at the elementary school. With the need of getting things up and down the stairs quickly, this is going to be very helpful. So I know the custodians and the food service staff are most appreciative of the elevators. And as Dana said, it isn't perfect yet, but we're getting there. So That's good news. Other good news is that the vaccines are coming. And I know that, Colleen, you brought that up before, but in a very practical way here in the school district, this week, our nurses and our therapists, that means our OTs, our PTs, our speech teachers, they have become eligible for the vaccination. So starting today, some of our staff members are getting vaccinated. And that's the beginning of what I hope will be a very important turning point in this pandemic, especially as it impacts our school district. Before the holiday, right, the day before the holiday, we were in a 2-day closure, and that was unfortunate for some of the end of the school year. I'm sorry, end of the calendar year events, including the senior dinner. But one of the things that our high school did was, though on senior dinner day, seniors were not in school, the dinners were delivered personally to every senior, and they were able to connect, again, like we're doing right now on Zoom for that dinner. So they were able to have a celebration. And in a similar way, the high school is working on winter carnival options. Of course, we know that winter carnival will not be the same this year, and that's going to be an unfortunate thing. But they are working on making some winter carnival options available that will be safe and doable. So you can stay tuned for those. Every student in the district was eligible for a free skating pass this year, and that was supplied by generous donors as well as supported by ORDA. So good news for our kids. And then also right about Christmas time, our backpack program distributed $6,000 in food cards to some of our families. So a lot of good things going on, even though we do tend to focus on the potential pitfalls. Every day, there's a lot of good things going on in classrooms. There's a lot of good people reaching out to others. So we continue to, I think, look ahead, hopefully and optimistically. And while we know there are going to be setbacks, keep on moving forward as well and as much as we can. And that's, again, thanks to a terrific group of people here, staff, faculty, and students. As far as where are we right now, we're in the beginning of our return from Christmas break. We are hoping for 2 complete weeks of school before the 3-day weekend. And that's the one that's centered around Martin Luther King's birthday on January 18th. And I know the board is back on the 19th. So hopefully this will all work out and we'll be able to look back on this 2-week stretch and be happy with how it went. So that's everything I have. Any questions or comments for me?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Roger.
Yep,
Thank you.
thanks.
Information for the board. There's one item, the 2021-22 draft calendar. Any comments, Roger, on that, other than your comments that were in board docs?
In many ways, this is I guess you could say a normal calendar, but there were some twists. The new holiday, the Juneteenth holiday, that's a new twist. And what makes that a twist is that it comes right at the end of the school year, which means that it will be a required day off from school, which means we can't count it as student contact day. By the way, there's no commentary on Juneteenth itself, just to let you know how it impacts our school district. That means that we have to account for that somewhere else in the calendar in order to meet our 182 days. So that's one thing we're working on. The other that we're working on is the last day of school. The state education department provides us with this testing calendar, which ends on what they call rating day. Rating would be rating the Regents exams. Whether or not we have Regents exams this year, we're going to find out. But the Regents exam period, that's this year. But we're looking at next year's calendar. The Regents exam period for next year's calendar actually ends on a Thursday. And you might recall that they did this in the past, and it does provide some complications for us. In addition to meaning that we also have to pull, we have to find that 182nd day somewhere else in the calendar. So what you're looking at is just working with the boundaries that they set and dealing with some of those twists. It's always possible that some of this could change. As a matter of fact, there is a movement at the state level to return Friday the 24th to being the last day, which would match up nicely with our traditional graduation day. So we'll see where that goes. This is, again, a work in progress. I share this with you now. I share this with the administrators here. I also share this with other school districts in the region because it's best if, especially the school districts that share a BOCES, for us that's Tupper Lake, Saranac Lake, us and Long Lake. It's best if we use a common calendar or a calendar that is as close, or calendars that are as close as possible to each other. So this is where we are right now.
Great. Thank you. Any questions on the calendar? I'm sure more to come. So linking goals with agenda items. Anybody have anything?
I was thinking about this item earlier today, and it's sort of pro forma, and some of us say something, some of us don't. It made me think that maybe it's worthwhile revisiting our vision, goals, and objectives for this school year. Maybe offline, not as a part of this meeting. I don't want to take over the meeting, but we put a lot of work into that plan, and it deserves a little care and feeding.
Sure. I mean, I can send it out if everybody, does everybody have a copy? I'll send a copy out anyhow. Or Karen, you have the final copy. So if you could get out to everybody via email.
Yeah, one thing Karen's pointing out is that it is featured on the front page of Board Docs. So if you were to go, you're clicked right now on agenda. If you were to be clicked on featured, that's in the upper area of the menu. You click on featured, you would then see under documents, board goals and objectives 2020-21. That's what you were talking about, right, Karen? And so you see it right there next to that beautiful photograph of the middle and high school on a cold and snowy December morning.
Thank you. Does that work, Martha? You think? Just a reminder. I have a copy in my file that I just every evening I look over. Not every evening, but I mean before a board meeting. So, any other comments? If not, capital project update. I think, Dana, you hit a lot of this. Is there, other than the incident report that's in there, anything else?
No, I think, we had the committee meeting, and hit upon a lot of it, and Roger talked about it as well in his report in terms of a lot of the punch list stuff. When you look at it, Bass Hatfield's trailer is gone. Schoolhouse is no longer here every day. So when you drive through, it looks like a normal non-construction school day.
Excellent. Change orders, there are no change orders. Moving right on to the meeting minutes, that's under the consent. And then on to personnel matters, there's a teaching staff sick leave request. And the recommended action is, upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve the medical leave request of Heather Brewer, social studies teacher at middle and high school beginning January 2nd, 2021 through March 26th, 2021, in accordance with Article 19H of the LPEA contract dated July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. May I have a motion to accept this leave?
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen. Second, Martha. Any comments, discussion?
One question. Why January 2nd is a start date, which is a Saturday, versus like January 4th, which would have been the first day of school?
My best answer for this is that that's what was written in the letter. And so rather than ask her to rewrite the letter, we went with that date. It doesn't really change anything because there are no work days, of course, as you pointed out, until the 4th. And so that was really it.
Okay.
Any additional comments, questions? If not, please vote.
Seven yes.
We have 7 yes, 0 no. The motion passes. Teaching assistant maternity leave request extension. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve the maternity leave extension request of Cameron Shipman, teaching assistant at the elementary school through March 26th, 2021. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Yes.
First with Dan, a second with Liam. Does that
Yep.
sound good?
Yep, sounds fine.
Any discussion on this request?
Hope all goes well.
Yes. If not, any other questions, comments, please vote.
Seven yes.
7-4-0. Long-term teaching staff appointment. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, Lucas Perez is hereby appointed to a long-term position of 7th grade social study teacher, replacing Heather Brewer in the middle high school, commencing on January 4th, 2021, with a salary of $48,438, step 1 with a master's plus 42, the per diem rate of $266.14 of the teacher's salary schedule for the 2020-2021 school year. May I have a motion for this appointment?
Yes.
Thank you, Joan. Second.
Yes.
Dan? Dan. Any discussion on this appointment?
As a 7th grade parent, I'd like to say that Mr. Perez has already made a little bit of a splash and we like him.
Really nice to hear, Martha. Sometimes the stars align. And even though we had a very narrow window to do a search for this position, to find a smart, young, energetic teacher like Mr. Perez, it's a really good feeling when that happens. So I think you'll be hearing more good news as the year goes on.
That's awesome. Is he a person of color?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion, questions? If not, please vote.
Seven yes.
7 yes, 0 against. The appointment is passed. Other actions, the senior tax exempt resolution. Be it resolved, the Lake Placid School Board of Education hereby adopts the senior tax exemption resolution as per the attached. I have a motion to accept this tax exemption.
Yes.
Colleen, I heard, saw. Second.
Yes.
Got that, Karen?
I think it was Dan Marvin.
Okay.
Faster with this unmute button.
Any questions, comments on this resolution? If not, please vote.
Seven yes.
7 yes, 0 against. The resolution passes. Next up is the special education. That's under consent. Are there any questions regarding the January 19th packet? And if not, we'll go good of the cause. Any emails or?
There was none.
Okay, thank you. Entering the adjournment phase, the next meetings are listed there, January 19th, 2021, February 2nd, and the 16th. You can't miss Karen's red highlighted area. Just try to not be here at the proper time. Any questions on those meeting dates?
No.
If not, any old agenda items? Or new topics? Okay. Then we'll enter the adjournment phase. Motion to adjourn, please.
So move.
Daniel?
Was it?
Daniel Cow.
And then Martha seconded. And all in favor? Aye.
Hi.
So we're adjourned.
Daniel, you're so
7:13.
funny.
I did what?
Daniel, you're so funny.
I didn't get this far on my looks.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. That was a very brief meeting. Appreciate it.
Are we
Thank you.
adjourned? Are we adjourned, Rick?
Yes.